In order to understand what the Simbi classroom really is, you need to understand what takes place inside the Simbi classroom. Now, the Simbi classroom uses a unique reading application called Simbi. And the way Simbi functions is that it acts as an amazing teaching tool for students in the sense that they're now able to listen and read simultaneously. These students at the Yonatan Netanyahu Memorial School, they're able to log into the Simbi app, and once they log in, they're able to choose a piece of content that they'd like to read. And when they click on the content that they choose and read, they're now able to read the text and listen simultaneously. So they hear students' voices across the world reading to them, and they're reading at the same time. And through a study that we conducted in rural Uganda, right here, 6 months ago, and through another study that we conducted in Hadassah Primary School, which is in Nabagoya village 1 year ago, what we saw is that the treatment group that participated in our randomized control trial that used the Simbi technology for a 30-day period became significantly better readers, with many of them reading on average of 4 words correct per minute. So once you understand that your unique reading app works, and you see the benefit of it in these rural communities, how do you actually take it and implement it in a location that does not have consistent access to internet, that doesn't have technology, and that doesn't have any of these items that we require to implement the reading app? And that's where the Simbi classroom was designed and invented. And the Simbi classroom is designed from a 40-foot shipping container. On top of it, we have a 35-degree angle, and we've got a 35-degree slope or angle roof, which minimizes the amount of direct solar radiation that gets into the classroom, so it keeps it nice and cool. And then on top of that, we have 5 100-watt solar panels, which collect enough sunlight and power enough of our 12-volt battery packs to charge our 16 laptops. These are Chromebooks. Now, the 16 Chromebooks are all loaded with an offline version of Simbi, so that when things are moving quite slowly and network is down, Simbi still functions nicely. But then on top of that, what we've created is a really unique intranet system using microcomputers called Raspberry Pis. And what we've done is we've taken 64 gigabytes of the most incredible educational content, whether it's TEDx videos or TED videos, or Khan Academy, the entire Khan Academy library, or our Simbi reading app, and quite a lot more. We've put that on our 64 gigabyte micro SD cards. These are put into our microcomputers, into our Raspberry Pis, which are plugged into routers. These sit in the back of the classroom, just behind the safe, and all of the computers are able to run and access this incredible educational material. What we've also done is added a 1,000-liter water catchment system onto the other side. So water will trickle down the slope of the roof, and it is all caught in these gutter systems, which then lead to the downspouts and these water catchment pieces. And not only does it ensure that the community are able to improve their access to water, but it also helps to ensure that all of the teachers and all of the students are actually seeing the benefit of these very simple technologies, water catchment. And what we see is that after they're implemented and integrated, it's quite frequent to see other communities and other people in the community also implementing this technology. So it's amazing to see you create a technology and implement it, and then see other community members continue to implement it as well. So we're currently in the month of July, and the walking school bus team and I arrived in Putti village 5 days ago. And when we drove into Putti village to Yonatan Netanyahu Memorial School, where we currently are, we saw this current setup. We saw all of these students studying outside under the mango trees. And the truth of the matter is, it's a beautiful sight to see. It looks beautiful. But when you start to think about the weather, and you start to think about how that negatively impacts learning, you realize the need to build proper classrooms. So what we see is that right now in the month of July, we have rain at least once a day, if not twice. When it rains, the students run as quickly as they can to get out of the rain, specifically because they want to get their booklets out of the rain, which get damaged. We also see that the students are able to very easily distract themselves. Right here where we are, we have 1 class, 2 class, and 3 classes, and there is immense distraction. And in terms of return on investment for time spent learning, it is just imperative that we put students in classrooms with proper chalkboards where teachers are able to adequately teach. And that's what we're working on doing right now. I first traveled to Uganda 7 years ago, after my family and I had been inspired by a remarkable interfaith coffee farmer named Keki. And upon arriving in this beautiful country, something that really stayed with me was the distance that so many students were traveling to school, with many of them walking over 5 kilometers to and from school. And seeing that, I thought back to my luxury of access to education and how frequently I took it for granted. And I realized that this was something that really had to be improved upon, that student access to education in Uganda had to be improved. Now, a few years later, after starting my master's degree in economics, I realized that I had an opportunity to really understand how distance would impact attendance rates. As most researchers do, before I started the proper research, I traveled back to Uganda and I started doing some data collection. And the first level of data collection was really to run and walk with the students to school and to understand what their journey looked like. So currently we're in Putti village, and just 3 kilometers away was where our journey would start in the morning. And for a 2-week period, I was traveling with the students to school. And after sometimes jogging, usually walking quite quickly or jogging, after we arrived at school, I realized that many of the students weren't eating, and they wouldn't eat until 11 o'clock. And the reason was that we were in the dry season, and the students simply didn't have enough food, and the schools didn't have enough food to get the students over the hump of the day. So they fed them at 11 o'clock to really space out the food well. And so I started to realize that if we were helping students get to school, or if that was the end goal, to help them get to school, but they didn't have adequate access to nutrition, which is a prerequisite for education, it wasn't really beneficial. Now, after spending some time here in the classrooms in Putti village, something that I realized was how many teachers didn't really have the English background they required to be teaching English. And what we understand with English and fluency is that it's the #1 predictor of academic success. Now, I thought about my childhood and growing up, and as a student with dyslexia, I had always struggled academically. My teachers spent thousands of dollars on extra lessons. I was really fortunate to have this amazing social safety net that ensured that I would be able to be an active member in my society. And later I was able to become educated based on this amazing education that I was given. But I looked around in these classrooms and I thought about many of the other students like me, students with learning disabilities, students who learned at a different pace, students who didn't understand everything the teachers were saying and who weren't benefiting from this curriculum. What I started to realize was that there were many teachers who weren't actually showing up to school as frequently as they should. And upon further investigation, I realized that in eastern Uganda, you often see a 30% absenteeism rate for teacher attendance. So recognizing all of these issues of access, nutrition, and curriculum, I realized that not one of them would help solve the problem, but this more unique 3-pronged approach. And that was how the walking school bus was developed. Now, the walking school bus have employed this unique 3-pronged approach of access, nutrition, and curriculum. And under access, we work in 2 main ways. One, we gift school buses, which do 2 things. One, they help students get to school, And two, they generate revenue by actually working as a transportation vehicle, which sustain the school bus. The second area is we currently sponsor 16 scholars. Now these scholars are sponsored on 5-year academic scholarships, and they are picked by two main variables or criteria. One, they are particularly high academic achievers, and two, they come from incredibly marginalized communities. And what we're able to do by identifying these qualities is that we're able to ensure that our few dollars are able to go the furthest and eventually help get the students to high school and later university. It's a pleasure to introduce Enosh Keki, who is the Walking School Bus's Director of Uganda Operations. Enosh and I have been working together for the last 5 years, and it's just remarkable what we've been able to accomplish in this very short time. So most recently, Enosh was instrumental in securing the school bus, and he'll be telling you a little bit about that.
Thank you very much to the Walking School Bus team from Canada for the effort made in offering a school bus. You know, our schools, I believe they are going to actually benefit a lot from the school bus. Like, for instance, we've been having so many functions, like ceremonies, but we've been lacking the means. For instance, maybe doing tours, going like to see the source of River Nile, or maybe children reaching out for study programs, like maybe field studies, and all that we've been renting, and it has been costing us a lot. But now that we have a school bus, I know the students are going to enjoy it very, very much. In Uganda, schools, mostly schools that are based in the villages, have got one major problem that we don't have means of transport, and students move a long way from home to school. Some move about 3 kilometers, and like you can see, I'm sitting nearby with some children. If you look at this kid moving a distance of 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers, it is a lot. So when we have such a bus carrying them, taking them to school and carrying them back and forth, that's actually like a very big pressure or prestige even. And then on top of that, there are many needs, like sometimes they lack scholastic materials, sometimes they lack the feeding, and all that. We think that maybe the bus and the Canadian school bus team would work together to solve that. But initially and basically, we are hoping that the bus is going to help a lot in ensuring that these needs, like scholastic materials, other educational needs, are actually solved.
This time last year, our team, working with Enosh and a few other members from Vancouver, journeyed to Uganda and conducted 250 questionnaires. And these questionnaires ask students a few different questions. How far were they traveling to school? When they weren't traveling to school, why weren't they traveling to school? How many days a week were they missing school? And what we saw was quite alarming. So we ended up finding that a disproportionate amount of the female students weren't going to school out of fear of harassment, sexual harassment, en route to school. And we also found that a significant part of the population were traveling between 5 to 8 kilometers to school and then home from school. And so it was with that understanding that we realized that a school bus really would be incredibly beneficial and could help improve this problem. But the next question that we had to address was, how do you triage effectively? How do you decide which students actually should be using the school bus? So what we were able to do was we were able to understand which female students were traveling the furthest distances, and we were able to use a mapping software to understand where they are located. And we are busy phasing in this data to help improve the school bus driving routes. So once we identified the need for a school bus to improve student access to education, the question was, what sort of transportation vehicle would we use? We had identified a few options, but many of the more traditional school buses that fit up to 38 students have very long wheelbases. And the very rocky, hilly roads and terrain that this school bus is traveling meant that that larger wheelbase would quickly depreciate, and that the bus would quickly depreciate. So what we had to figure out is which school bus would be used. We ended up identifying the Toyota Haiichi as the most effective school bus for this purpose. It's got a significantly shorter wheelbase, which means it won't depreciate as quickly. And in addition to that, it can be utilized as a private and public taxi here in Uganda, which means that when it is not transporting students to and from school in the morning and in the evening, it works in town, in Mbale town, as a private and public taxi, and it will generate up to 100,000 Ugandan shillings a day, which is just under $29 US. So this money is able to go back into the school bus to ensure that it can be sustained and maintained. And in addition to that, these funds are able to actually help the schools, the Yonatan Netanyahu Memorial School, Hadassah Primary School, and Samei Kangungulu High School. These funds go back into these schools and are able to purchase additional scholastic materials. So we're incredibly excited to finally have this bus here and to start see it being brought to fruition. In economic development, something that we often see happening is corporations and charities will gift infrastructure, they leave it, and they go. And something that we felt was very important, specifically working with Enosh, our Director of Uganda Operations, and myself, was that the community who were receiving the infrastructure really felt attached to it, really wanted to make it their own. And so what we're doing right here, right now, is we're working with the students to paint the school bus, to give them that sense of ownership and feeling, and it's really been a beautiful experience to watch.